So I'm going to walk you through a quick example showing how to integrate something called Fulcrum, which is a service that lets you build mobile data collection apps with Accela Automation. Fulcrum has some really interesting properties in that it lets you quickly and easily build powerful data collection apps that can be pushed out to any iPhone or Android device. And the data that is collected through these apps can be accessed through an API or through what's called webhooks, and then put into Accela Automation using the Accela Construct API. So this is a really powerful concept because it lets you build apps really, really quickly and distribute them to the people that you want using the devices that they've already got, and to be able to take that information and to put it into your back-end Accela system quickly and easily. So what I like about Fulcrum is that it's just got this really simple process of creating an application. You basically put in a phone number and it will send a link to download the mobile app, and then you add members and those members get access to the applications that you create. Now what's cool is that they've got this really extensive gallery of pre-built applications. In fact, the example I'll show you in a minute uses one of them that was pre-built, and I just custom tailored it to my liking. Or I can actually go in and I can design my own. It's got this really nice drag and drop interface that lets you build a mobile app. And you add the fields and the kind of fields and the selections, and it's super easy to use. So what I did was I actually used one of the existing Fulcrum demo apps and just tailored it to my needs. It's a very simple app to collect information on graffiti. You can imagine maybe a neighborhood services unit that was going around and remediating graffiti would use an app like this to record the location of graffiti, what kind of graffiti it was, where it was located, when it happened, and even capture a picture to keep track of all that. Pretty self-explanatory, the fields that I've got here. Just a picture of the graffiti. I'm going to capture the address, and because this will go out to a mobile device, I'll also get the coordinates. I'm going to ask the user to tell me what kind of graffiti this is. This is optional, but I thought it would be kind of interesting to capture that. Where it is it on a wall? Is it on a building? Is it on a shop? You name it. We can capture it there, and then just the date that it happened. Now again, you can add any number of fields that you want to by simply just dragging and dropping them using the menus to the left here. So I've already got this app built. What I want to do is I want to actually leverage something that's really interesting about Fulcrum called webhooks. Webhooks are a way to send an HTTP request when something happens. So every time one of my mobile users captures a new instance of graffiti, I want to send a message to a small application that I'm going to show you in just a second. And that application is then going to interact with the Accela Construct API and actually put these records right into my back-end Accela system. So the documentation for the Accela Construct API is at our developer center, developer.accela.com. You'll find all the information you need there to start using the Construct API. In addition, we recently released an early version, still developing, but also really powerful still, a Node.js module, which I'm going to show you in just a minute. I'm going to use this Node module to actually create an HTTP server that can accept a webhook. You'll find this on GitHub. This is what it looks like. It's actually really simple. It simply looks for a bundle of JSON that gets sent to it by Fulcrum, and then it maps the fields from the Fulcrum JSON to these objects that I'm going to send into Accela Automation. Now let's take a look at the JSON that we're going to get from Fulcrum. It's pretty straightforward. But what you'll want to do is you'll definitely want to take a look at this JSON. Oops, there is no cats. Silly goose. You'll want to take a look at this JSON. The fields have what look like globally unique identifiers. You'll want to understand what they're called and what that JSON looks like before you map it to your objects that you're going to send into Accela Automation. So as I said before, this is a really simple Node.js Express app, which is just going to accept an HTTP post. This doesn't have to be Node.js. This could be literally anything that can speak HTTP and can parse JSON, which is everything from Java to .NET to PHP to Cold Fusion for that matter. Really, any sort of web technology will do here. This does not have to be Node.js. But what I'm going to do is, let's actually go ahead and I'm going to shrink this window down a little bit. As you can see, what I've got here is I've got using an Accela object to actually interact with the API, and I'm writing out a bunch of debug statements here that will tell me when each step in the process has occurred. I'm going to create a new record, and then I'm going to add some address information, and then I'm going to add a comment which will include the URL to the picture of the graffiti that I want my mobile app, or excuse me, my mobile user to send in. So let's do this. Let's run this thing. So my app is running right now. It's actually running on port 3000, which you can see in the Node.js code here. Now, to accept a webhook, I've got to have something that can be exposed to the outside world. So I'm going to use something called ngrok, which actually lets me set up essentially an SSH tunnel to an external server, and that will actually expose my local machine to the outside world. So I already got it installed on my machine. I want to tell ngrok that I'm going to be using port 3000, and what it gives me is it gives me this really nice both HTTP and HTTPS endpoint that I can use. And this is where the outside world can now reach the Node application that's running on my server. So what I want to do is I want to go into my Fulcrum account, and in the settings I want to add a new webhook. And the webhook, the URL is going to be that ngrok URL that we just set up. And I'm going to make sure that it's active. And now that webhook is set. So when my mobile app actually creates a record, the Fulcrum platform will then push a JSON payload to my Node.js app, which will then parse that JSON and create new objects and send them into Accela Automation. So what I ought to be able to do is I ought to actually be able to use a mobile app, capture an instance where graffiti has occurred, and then I ought to be able to see that in Accela Automation. So what you're seeing now is my mobile device. I'm actually going to jump onto Fulcrum here. Okay, now that I've logged into Fulcrum, I have access to all of the applications that my organization manager has given me access to. And you can see one of them is the graffiti mapper here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to access that application. And what I'm going to do is, let's do this. So there's my Fulcrum app, and here's my Node server. So what I ought to be able to do is I got to be able to see the debug statements in my code that I wrote writing out here on my terminal as I create a new record. Let's see if I can do that. So fortunately, I already have a picture of some graffiti that I'm going to use. You can see that the app has already basically captured my address, so it's got my physical address, and it's got lat long up for my position. So I'm going to say that this was vandalism, and the platform, I'm going to say it was on street furniture. It's actually on a mailbox, and the date of the graffiti, the date I saw it, was today. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to save this record, and in the upper right hand of the app here, what you'll see is this synchronization option, which is really nice. What it'll do is it'll actually now send the record I just created to the Fulcrum platform. So if you have mobile workers who are working in a place where they don't have access, it's really nice because they can continue to work, and then when they get back to a place where they've got an internet connection or some sort of network connection, they can actually they can now send their work in. So what I ought to see is I ought to see some activity in this terminal window here. Okay, created a new record in Accela Automation, added the address, and then I added the URL to the media file. Great, so I've now created a record in Accela Automation using this mobile app that I built on Fulcrum. And here, what I've written out is the actual record ID in Accela Automation. So what I ought to be able to do is, I ought to be able to log into an instance of Accela Automation, which you can see here. This is a test instance that we use to develop apps. And I ought to be able to, I have a correct login. I ought to be able to log in here. And once it loads, I ought to be able to put in my record ID, and I ought to be able to see the record. And there it is. Let's look at the details just to make sure that it looks like the record we sent in. Yep, okay, so it's vandalism. The type of graffiti is vandalism. It's located on street furniture. And let's take a look at, let's see if we got our URL to our audio or our media file. Should be in our comments down here. Yep, it is. You can see the URL is actually to a JPEG file on the Fulcrum platform. And one last thing we want to check is the address, just to make sure we got that. Yep, we did. We got the physical address, the street address, and we also got the lat long. So what I just showed you here in a matter of, I guess, say less than 10 minutes is how easy it is to build a powerful data collection app on Fulcrum, and using a simple piece of middleware like Node.js, which could be replaced by any web technology that you like. I was able to actually insert a record into my backend Accela system. So this is really powerful because it really enables me to put really useful applications quickly and easily and cheaply into the hands of my mobile workforce so that they can actually collect information and help me do my job.